When we asked this of the government, it used examples of private companies to justify its decision. The consensus position of governments around the world is that tax havens inhibit the revenue mobilization efforts of countries, especially in our part of the world. The reason many regulators around the world are cracking down on tax havens. For Ghana's government to do business and hide from tax anywhere in the world is a bad message to the rest of the world, particularly when the country is struggling to defend itself before the European Union, having been blacklisted on account of high money laundering risk. Question 4. Why is government exempting Agyapa from taxes when it will be partly owned by investors? Although the royalties are taxes, when a portion is sold to investors, dividend payout is income that must be subjected to tax. At that point, the government is not taxing itself. Rather, it is taxing income from a company in which it is only a shareholder. The provision in Section 28(5) of the Mineral Income Investment Fund Act seeks to declassify royalties as taxes and make it a revenue stream for Mineral Income Investment Fund, and by extension, Agyapa. Exempting Agyapa from taxes does not exempt government alone, but also the investors. This is the more reason why the government should not exempt Agyapa from taxes, and failure to do so only benefits the investors. Question 5. In considering Agyapa, what becomes of government's manifesto promise to increase royalty share to mining affected communities? In government's 2016 manifesto, it stated that, and I quote, "With regard to mineral royalties, the MPP's policy is to ensure that mining communities receive a higher share of the royalties. Currently, 80% of the royalty goes to government, 10% to the Minerals Commission, and 10% to the community. The MPP will reduce government share to 70% while doubling community share to 20%. The additional 10% to the community will be given to the District Assembly to be used specifically for developing infrastructure in the mining communities." End of quote. How government is responding to this promise is missing from its new efforts through the Mineral Income Investment Fund and the related Agyapa transaction. Ladies and gentlemen, these are important questions that require a national conversation to be addressed. It is not enough for the Minister of Finance or the government to ask citizens to trust their sincerity and their expertise. It would not be right for them to try to bulldoze through a controversial transaction such as this, and about which genuine questions have been raised by experts as well as by ordinary Ghanaians. We are therefore reiterating our call to the government to suspend implementation of this transaction pending a national dialogue on options available to optimize Ghana's mineral royalties. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Doug. I think at this juncture we'll open the floor for questions from the media. So if you'd like to ask your question, just raise your hand. I'll get the mic and I'll take it from there. So if you mentioned your name and the media house you come from.
Thank you very much. So my name is Isaac. I represent Agyapa. I want to ask a very simple question. So first of all, I think the very last press conference you had, they pushed the government to also have a press conference to deal with that issue. Yes, and for me, I think it's very positive. The group is really working. But this is the question. If
those are live visuals coming to you from the Swiss Spirit Alisa Hotel, where some 15 CSOs are addressing the press again on the controversial Agyapa Mineral Royalties Deal. You may remember a couple of weeks ago, they, at the same venue, expressed concern about the lack of transparency, they say, in that particular deal. They asked for a suspension of it pending further consultation. We know that they met with the finance minister. There have been a series of engagements. The finance minister spoke here on Newsfile and said that details of the deal were going to be published. He mentioned that there was nothing fishy about the deal, but the CSOs do not appear convinced. They say they want, this time round, a national dialogue and a suspension of the deal. There are questions being asked now. Hopefully we have better sound. Let's take you there.
Situation. Is it that the alliance is not satisfied with the responses that the government has provided so far on some of these questions? Or you think that the government has not been forthright with the data on some of these questions? That's why you are reiterating the questions. Thank you.
We spoke to Honorable Kennedy yesterday in our news on Agyapa, and he says that because the CSOs have not been given any ground envelope, the decision to attack government deal. And he says that it is not only Agyapa, but any other government deal that you support, because you were used, they give you something, that is why you either support or reject. And hence, in this case, they haven't been given any other thing, so the decision to attack the deal. How do you respond to this?
I'll take the last one and then the next one.
My name is Brenda Onibati from Star FM. I'll just what the engagement to the minister has been. I know there's been a series of engagements behind the back door. Has been fruitful, except that you are not being given ear to the reason you're having this particular conference. As government position still, the reason we're having this. I just want to know what has been the engagements so far and the posturing of the ministry.
I think any member of the alliance can start.
It is rather unfortunate that Honorable Kennedy Japan will make such a statement. And unfortunate because it is self-indicting. By that statement, he's suggesting to us that that is what they do whenever they want to push through anything that is controversial. I don't think, if that's what they do, then my advice to them is to stop it. It's not a good practice. There's also the question as to what we will do if the government does not yield. I guess when we get to the bridge, we'll know how we cross it. For now, we are hoping, against all hopes, that government will listen to reason and will do what will be in the best interest of the country, which is to suspend the deal, come back to the table, and let's see what safeguards we put in this whole transaction to protect the national interest. Thank you. My colleagues will respond to the others.
we still don't have that. We have seen the data from the Chamber of Mines, but that is always reconciled by the Ministry of Finance. Those numbers are important because part of the conversation that we've been having with the valuation of the asset or the revenue is to be able to ensure that we are not undervaluing the asset. So whilst we're maintaining that Ghana got about 200 million in 2019, government conversation kept putting that number around $150 million. And we don't know why, government that should have a full picture of how much royalty it received in 2019 would be underreporting the numbers. And most importantly, when you have opportunity to meet the ministry in their own premises, and they give you half-year numbers of $72 million, it raises questions as to whether something is being hidden from us. And that is why we still insisted that we want government reconciled numbers. Because those numbers are extremely important for the estimation and forward calculation of how the revenue stream will look like. So if you are underreporting that, then we don't know what actually fed into the 1 billion valuation that they actually got. And, we're asking questions about the valuation because if you are selling your product, you should know how much you want for that product. If you are selling your house, you're selling your car, you're selling your phone, you should know how much you want. And if I want to buy it, I would tell you that no, you want 1,000, I can pay 800. Or I can even give you 1,100 based on certain conditions. And that's what the market does. So you go to the market with the valuation of your asset. The net asset value is not going to be done by the market. The market will give you a fair value. What they think should be the value of the asset. So if government says that the 1 billion is not the valuation they are taking to the market, then they should tell us what valuation they're taking to the market. So those questions have not been answered. We need data. We need the assumptions. We need, data on the reserves that were used, the distinctiveness of government royalty, and how all of that were factored into the calculations. Because the work we do and the trend we see in the sector is that year on year, in terms of output, government revenue from royalty has been increasing. Ghana has been improving on output. So all of that has to be reflected in the assumptions that government will use to value the assets. And that helps us ask relevant questions so that we are not just assuming and speculating, but we have numbers that we can interrogate to say you are wrong, you are not factoring this, you are not analyzing this. And we can be better informed about the decision that is being taken. So that is really what we're seeking to do with that. The law, as Doctor has explained, we were not consulted. The civil society only got to know about the law when it had passed. And we've been part of the process of governance in this country, and laws have been passed. We've received memos from Parliament, even from ministries. The Ministry of Finance in the past would even send their draft. Before it goes to Parliament, the draft law will be circulated to stakeholders, for stakeholders to make comments on the draft. And then the draft is then submitted to the Attorney General. So we understand the process of lawmaking. Why in the particular of myth? Nobody was consulted. Citizens were not consulted. Chiefs were not consulted. Communities were not consulted. It just went to Parliament, it got passed, and that law was just sprung on us. And then also subsequent events of rushing it through Parliament being given about 4 hours to consider all the agreements that were aligned to Agyapa. These raises questions. And that is why it is important that we halt at this point and explain the issues. Let citizens be clear about what government intentions are and what assumptions are informing government decision to sell half of our royalty and assume that you are selling, but you will still maximize the royalties. And those are very important conversations that we cannot have in 3-4 hours as was done in Parliament. Thank you.
There's an outstanding issue of duration of the contract, of the transaction. If you can
Sorry?
clarify. He asked a question that...
Oh, the duration. I think it's clear in the contract that, so they're looking at every contract and the time left on the contract. So some have 10 years, some have 15 years, some are just about starting, 25 years. And also the contract allows extension of those concessions. So if, for example, you extend Newmont's concession after the expiration of their lease, automatically that is also extended. So those are the clarities that you would want to find with the kind of conversation we want to have with government to clarify those specifics. But clearly, you can interpret that to mean that they've been given the royalties as long as the companies continue to produce on those concessions.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Richard. I go to the Business 24. I would want to congratulate the group on the work we've done so far and for the sort of enlightenment they brought to the discussion. And first of all, I have two or three questions. And the first one will dwell on the last press conference you had, or the first one, if I should say. One of the running themes in that particular press conference was beneficiary ownership. And I would want to know, I mean, having engaged government or having taken the pains to look at some of the documents, I mean, that have been shared with you, what is your position on that particular point that you raised in your first press conference? Are you satisfied regarding the answers you've been given, regarding those who are behind the company, or, I mean, unmasking those who potentially own the company? I mean, I don't know, you can just shed light on that. And then also, I know you've already mentioned regarding the copies of the slides that was given to you by the ministry. You said some important ones were omitted or were not packed, whether it was deliberate or not, you cannot tell.
We're still bringing you that live interaction between some heads of CSOs and media persons here in Accra at the Swiss Spirit Elisa Hotel. If you may remember, a few weeks ago, the CSOs organized a press conference just like this, asking government to suspend the controversial Agyapa Royalties Agreement for further consultation. Now, between that time and today, they met with the finance minister. There have been a series of responses from government, the finance minister himself, and the CSOs don't appear convinced. They are asking for a suspension. They're still holding on to that. This time they are asking for national dialogue on the matter. We'll take you back there when we are able to get proper sound coming in from the venue. But so far what's happened is that Ben Boachi, who is with ASEP, says there's no enough justification for setting up the SPV in a tax haven, and that's based on responses government has given so far to their concerns. We also heard from Dr. Steve Mantiao, who says that we should have something similar to the Petroleum Revenue Management Act because that's been lauded as one of the best on the continent. Let's go back and hear Ben Boachi, who's with ASEP.
Which we have stated that the key parts had been omitted from those slides. We've seen documents circulating which points to the registration documents of Agyapa, which actually shows that Myth owns it 100%, right? And I gave you a scenario of some of the tracking we have done in the past, where a company called AGM was owned 100% by AGM Gibraltar. Then you go to the background of AGM Gibraltar, and it's also owned by a chain of companies. And then you go to the various chain of companies they are owned. So that's what they do in secrecy, in the secret jurisdiction. So to be able to know who actually owns it, the Registrar General will have to declare all the chain to you before you get to know it. And it's difficult to do that in a tax haven. And that is the primary reason why we think Ghana shouldn't patronize the tax haven. So we don't have the full, we can grant that for the first document we have seen, MIF owns Agyapa 100%. But as to whether somebody owns MIF in that country, we don't know. And you can never know until it is declared to you by the Registrar General of that country. So essentially, that is what there is about the registration of the company. I think the last time we met also, some of the reasons for, I think Callistus asked whether we're not satisfied about the response that have been given as the reason for registering the tax haven. One of the recent excuses we've heard is that the Norwegian fund is registered in Luxembourg and all of that. No, Norwegian fund is a fund. It's money of the state that is invested, and it's invested by the Central Bank of Norway. So it cannot be accurate that they are registered in the tax haven with their own money. We are going to sell our company in partnership with other investors. It's a different arrangement altogether. So it tells you that the explanations that we are being given are not entirely accurate. So we are expanding this conversation to really get citizens to be part of it. So the group has registered a link on change.org. And the campaign is called Agyapa Listen. So we want our president to listen and halt this transaction for a national conversation. So in your networks, you can look out for it, change.org, and you search Agyapa Listen. You will see the campaign and you can share in your network for citizens to participate in the campaign. So thank you very much.
We take this opportunity to thank you very much for coming. You have been our willing partners in this fight.
And you're also invited to sign up. You're also.
Oh. I don't say more. So thank you very much for coming. You have been with us in this fight since the
Thank you so much for staying here on the JoyNews channel. So you heard there's some CSOs still raising concerns about the Agyapa Minerals Royalty Deal. They're asking government to suspend it. They say they want a national dialogue. They raise concerns about the setup in a tax haven. And you just heard Mr. Ben Boachi. They're still defending their stance on the matter, saying that enough reason has not been given for that particular decision that was taken. And earlier, Dr. Steve Mantia was questioning why they don't have something similar to the Petroleum Revenue Management Act, which allows for more transparency in how the money, so the revenue, is spent. So we'll be bringing you more on this here on the JoyNews channel. But thank you so much for staying with us. Shortly at 12, though, there'll be news with Daniel Dazi. Do stay.